Professor 𝗙𝗵𝗶, who has just given us a brilliant keynote address. Dr. Augustus, the HR committee regional head, the chairman, Mr. 𝗙𝗵𝗍 𝗖, the co-chair, Ms. Nair, Uma Nair, the regional director, the many distinguished guests, all the participants in this day's workshop or summit. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to 𝗙𝗏𝗍 for organizing this very important series of discussions, panel discussions, addresses today. I think all the speakers before me have laid out the importance of this summit and the areas in which they should, or we should collectively, as government, as academia, as industry, be focusing. But those who know me a bit and those who see me on TV or on YouTube, I don't have any speech writers, and I don't normally prepare that much, so I come and speak what comes to my mind. So I thought I'd just talk about a few things today that occurred to me. In fact, one of the kind of bylines of my life is that I have been successful doing things which I thought were not my forte, and I have not been able to do a lot in my forte. I always say I was a better consultant than I was a trader or banker, but I made much of my money in the investment banking business. I got some level of respect as a financial manager of Tamil Nadu's balance sheet and economy and fisc. As my chief secretary recently told me, the Hindu pointed out that the only 2 years in a row that Tamil Nadu borrowed less money each year than the year before was when I was finance minister. And we brought the borrowing down from roughly 94,000 crores to 70,000 crores in 2 years. So we're moving in the right direction, at least in rupee terms, not adjusting for inflation. But all the time I was in my old role, I used to say, as far as I'm concerned, the human resources part of the job is much more important than the finance part of the job, because I was Minister for Finance and Human Resource Management. And sadly, I was not able to implement the kinds of changes. I set up a Human Resource Advisory Committee. Much of the changes I already knew what I wanted to do, but in government, it's much better to have a committee recommend it to you than kind of make it your own idea. But by the time the committee's report came, I was not in the seat anymore. I'll just say that structurally we have a problem. When I was a first-time MLA, the average vacancy rate in most governments across India, across all parties, this is not a political statement, was roughly 30 to 35% sanctioned jobs to actually fill jobs. Now that number has crept above 40% in almost every state and the union government. So there's something profoundly wrong with the way we staff and run government, from recruiting to training to promotion to evaluation to everything else. Maybe someday somebody else fixes it. It's not my portfolio. But the reason I bring it up is that I completely agree that how you manage human resources, how you select, how you train, how you qualify and continuously improve and validate and incentive align, and how you get the people in the right direction, the right people with the right skills in the right direction, by far determines outcomes, right? Outcomes don't get fixed by magic wands. You do the process right with the right people and you get good outcomes. In that sense, this is a very interesting topic, because as Dr. Augustus said, the future is now. I mean, things are evolving all the time. The future of work is already upon us. Just like I often say, the era of Indian human capital driving the global economy is already upon us. People say it's coming, it's already upon us. But this idea of how we think of work has actually been one of the profound drivers of the evolution of many things, including primarily technology. If you look at one of the seminal books that drove a lot of the computing revolution, it was by a gentleman called Vannevar Bush, who was successful industrialist, successful professor, brilliant inventor, and the main reason the US created the National Science Foundation. And back in the late 30s, early 40s sometime, he published a book called As We May Think, which many see as the precursor of kind of the, at least the revolution of computers taking over office work and making the white-collar jobs and office jobs more technology supported. And the idea was that machines should be able to do some of the things that we do and maybe do it better than us because they have infinite memory and they can process very cheaply. In my own time, my PhD dissertation was entitled Individual Differences in Cognition and the Implications for Computer Interface Design. And this was the era that we were all thinking about how, you know, computers were going to become ubiquitous. The first Apple Mac had come out. I think the first version of Microsoft Windows away from DOS had come. The nature of computing was changing, and so this was a timely topic at the time, late 80s, early 90s. But at the time, one of the pioneering institutions in the world who was creating what would later be the graphical user interface, the PostScript and Adobe, document format, the notion of laser printing, why even the mouse was an institution called Xerox PARC. It was funded by the Xerox Corporation, and it was called the Palo Alto Research Center. And it's an interesting story that you should read about sometime, because it talks about both human nature, that you don't want to make the same mistake twice. Xerox had been founded by people who realized how blinkered Kodak was because it was making money on one product, it couldn't see the future. And then Xerox ended up doing the same thing, despite setting up PARC, despite being the great innovator, never commercialized any of it, spawned a revolution. And then Xerox filed bankruptcy many years later. But a different story for a different day. But what is amazing about PARC, the reason PARC was set up, the one-line kind of motivation was envision the future office and how we can be relevant to it. Because what was Xerox? It was basically replacement of cyclostyling. It was photocopying. And so they realized that the future would keep changing. And so the motivation to set up this research center was simply to say, how will work change? How will white-collar work or office work change? And what are the technologies and what are the kind of products that will facilitate this? And how can we as a corporation benefit from making those and continuing to stay relevant? So this notion of how work is going to change is actually central to a lot of the research, certainly much of the evolution of technology. And in this particular case, this future of work, which is really how is work changing today and where is it likely to go, I think many brilliant concepts have already been stated here by the Vice Chancellor, by Dr. Augustus. But I want to just say a few things, and more to be supportive of 𝗙𝗍 and of my team. I'll touch on the topics they gave me in their briefing note. One about how the government of Tamil Nadu is improving its application of technology in the workforce. I think we are changing to an e-office system that's been ongoing for a while. You may have seen all the 𝗙𝗍𝗍 centers, that's not listed on this. But we're trying to move both government functioning and citizen-to-government interaction more and more online. And for the few people who can't access it online, to send the government to the people rather than have the people come to the government. So door delivery, whether it's 𝗙𝗪ஹை தேடி மருத்துவம் or at-home validation of digital life certificate for pension continuity, stuff like that. But we focus a lot also on skilling. We have the Nan Mudalvan scheme, we have the Tamil Nadu Skill Development Corporation. We work with a lot of entities. In my own department, the ICT Academy, which is the biggest and most impactful government-run training entity in the IT space, has offices in 10 states, though it's a Tamil Nadu company. And of course, the nature of work is changing by many variables. My own team has talked about how digital access and digital inclusion is vital, how changes in kind of socio-political and geopolitical frameworks, especially after every election. We see radical changes in governments, not just in India, but in other places. In the US, for example, how climate change and the green transition is changing the nature of work, how demographic shifts are changing the nature of work and where it's being done, and how kind of the breakdown of 2 or 3 decades of continuous global integration into the economy now being fragmented through the threat and the implementation of tariffs and the breakdown of agreements is going to change the nature of work. I agree with all of that. But that's in the public domain. But the few things I thought, just as kind of foundational points that maybe I could make here. The future of work, the first question is, who's going to be doing the work? And I think it is very clear that we are now in the era of Indian human capital that is going to drive the global economy. Now I can say that at a macro level and say that for the next 20 years, the percentage of young people joining the workforce, the working age, I'm not even talking about the workforce, the working age population of the world is going to be more like 1 in 4 in the world is going to be Indian. Even though the population is only about 1 in 6 in the world today is Indian. We have already seen this in outcomes in the sense that about 11% of the Fortune 500 companies are now led by Indian chairmen or CEOs or MDs. That number is only going to get higher. And even in administrations like that of President Trump in the United States, our SRM alumni are on the advisory for things like AI. So India in general is going to be a vital component of the evolution of the global economy, of its workforce, and particularly places like Tamil Nadu, where we've had the great luxury of a century of educational inclusion and probably 30, 40 years of great expansion. I often give the statistic, when I graduated from 𝗙𝗙𝗿, the state of Tamil Nadu had 8 or 9 engineering colleges and produced about 4,000 engineers a year, of which about 3,000 of us promptly left the country and went off to some global place. Further studies, work, whatever. Now the state of Tamil Nadu produces probably closer to 2 lakh engineers a year and still ends up staffing the global talent needs of the tech industry, as well as those of Bangalore and Pune and Hyderabad and Noida and everywhere else. But the scale is so high that as India benefits, Tamil Nadu will benefit in a much, much more leveraged way. The second is, how will this work be done? And if you had asked me a few years ago, I would have said much more of it will be done by labor migration, as it is happening inside India today. A lot of cross-state migration. Places like Tamil Nadu, the extent of manual labor that has come from the north, from Bihar, from West Bengal, from the northeast is so high. COVID gave us a lot of data because we had to get all these cross-border permits and arrange trains and all that. We were able to see the massive numbers, literally millions of people in our state of roughly 75 to 80 million people. At the time, at least, there were almost 3 to 4 million registerable and needed to be sent back home workers from other states. And we had so many hundreds of thousands of IT and white-collar workers of our own who were trying to migrate, come back across the border for the pandemic. So this, I thought, would be a continuing trend. But because of a lot of socio-political strife and a lot of kind of xenophobia rising in a lot of places, I'm not so sure anymore. I think we'll have a dichotomous world. I think countries like Canada, Australia, Singapore, Scandinavia, places where they have a declining population and improving economic situation, partly for natural resources, partly for other reasons, there's still going to be the need for a lot of migration of skilled talent. But places like the United States, at least in the short term, or UK, where there's a lot of backlash against migration and against immigrants, we're probably going to see a lot more of that work move offshore, just simply because there won't be enough people, and a lot of that is going to end up coming to India and coming to Tamil Nadu. So we're probably going to see a lot more remote work, especially with better internet connectivity, full speed video connectivity, and so forth. So even in our own TANFINET project, the ambition is to connect all 12,650 villages. All our cities are already fully high-speed, Wi-Fi, fiber connected, so that in my house I can get Wi-Fi 300 Mbps in Madurai, in Chennai, I'm sure in Salem and other places. But in the villages, the government is laying, with the government of India's support through the BharatNet program. So we can now say that the work will be migrated to wherever the talent is. Then the vital question of what? What is it that work is going to involve? And of course, it's going to change a lot by the nature of technology and these days also of AI. But I want to give an example that I was just talking about when we were waiting downstairs. In the manufacturing space, where I was a consultant, let's say in the late 80s in the United States, where I went as a graduate student, you could make a very, very good living being a manual laborer in a unionized auto or auto parts or defense factory. And you could have a house, a vacation home, a couple of cars, a boat. That's the kind of money they were making back then. Fast forward 20 or 30 years, of course, almost all manufacturing of the world moved to China. A lot of those jobs went away. But the jobs that remained, the nature has changed dramatically. If I go to an auto parts factory now, like I used to be a consultant for 10, 15 years, where there were 100 people back in the early 90s, there are probably 10 people now. The evolution of robotics, the functional ability of automating through robotics has profoundly changed the nature of work. It didn't happen overnight. It took time, but it happened. And so machines are going to do more and more of the things that relatively unskilled human beings could do. If you kind of project that to the AI revolution, it's going to take a long time. It's not as if lots and lots of jobs are going to disappear overnight. It's going to take probably 10 to 20 years before the full fruits of today's leading edge of AI are available to profit-seeking corporations or people serving governments. But that's more limitation of capital, of computing power, of innovation, of energy needs for data centers and computing. So it's more input constraint. It is the leading edge is already quite advanced, but to make the leading edge actually universally accessible is probably going to take a couple of decades. But what is going to happen is that, as the chairperson said, nature of jobs is going to change. So if you don't keep changing, you're probably going to become unemployed, number one. Number two, I think in some ways it's a profound shift. And I think the best explanation I heard of this was last year's Davos summit. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, was in a fireside chat. And the moderator asked him, in the new era of AI and Gen AI and all these GPUs, and all, what is it that we should be teaching our children in terms of the new approach to computer science? And he said, actually, the whole point of this revolution is that the computers program themselves. The job of the human is no longer to program the computer. The job of the human is to understand the basic science, the philosophy, the logic, the law, and basically be good at biology or chemistry or whatever, some other natural field where you gain in-depth knowledge. The machine will write its own code, but you have to be actually on the leading edge of the knowledge, because it only does kind of pattern recognition solution within the set of things it's trained to do, and maybe a little bit further. So, in continuation of that, I had a conversation about 10 days ago with the Vice President of Engineering at OpenAI, arguably one of the most advanced AI firms, He happens to be Tamil, happens to be from Chennai, across the street from my house. We were supposed to meet last year, something came up, we didn't meet. So when he came this time, we spoke. And he was talking about the need to get these machines, the amount of information that is needed for them to become generative. That is, you have to parse the data, you have to annotate it, you have to tag it, you have to break down the visual patterns into little blocks, like teaching a kindergarten kid, before these machines can actually then do on top of that, processing. So he said the amount of work needed to do that is going to be so high, and the kind of work needed to do that is changing every 2-3 months, because the ability of the machine to parse or take annotated data is also changing all the time. So literally the skill set is changing. If you want to be in that space, if you want to be in the AI facilitation, machine learning supporting space, that skill set is not changing once every 5 years or 10 years, it's changing every few months. So that's the speed at which kind of the leading edge of skilling is changing for AI. But again, that's a transitory phase. At some point, that will not be needed anymore. In like 5 or 10 or 15 years, these machines will have gotten enough raw data input with enough annotation and augmentation and tagging and pattern recognition that they will do the rest after that by themselves. And you'll have to keep moving to the next level of what the human brain does. And I think all these are profound trends underway right now. So in that sense, this is a very timely summit. ASSOCHAM, as the apex body of many chambers of commerce, I think is the right place to have this discussion. I believe that all of you in your respective groups, companies, associations, as people representing the kind of HR and HR management vertical, are going to be vital players in this transition. I wish you all a productive and thought-provoking and insightful day. I thank you once again for inviting me, and all the best.